My name is Mara Whitmore. I'm 32 years old. And for most of my life, my family had a strange way of measuring success. If Sabrina did something, it was impressive. If I did the same thing, it was expected. My older sister could walk into a room 10 minutes late and somehow receive applause for arriving. I could spend 3 years quietly preventing our parents from losing their house and still be treated like the disappointing daughter who needed to learn from her. I wish that were an exaggeration. It isn't. Friday, dinners at my parents' house were basically mandatory attendance. My father called it tradition, which sounded nicer than what it really was. A weekly ceremony where everyone sat around the dining table while he reminded us how extraordinary Sabrina was. That particular Friday, I knew what kind of evening I was walking into before I even reached the front door. A glossy black luxury SUV sat directly in the middle of the driveway. Chrome trim, oversized wheels, leather interior visible through the windows. The vehicle looked less like transportation and more like something displayed beneath spotlights at an auto show. My 10-year-old sedan was parked along the curb behind it. Its silver paint, fading on the hood, still ran perfectly. Apparently, reliability wasn't photogenic enough. Mom opened the door before I knocked. "Mara, come look at Sabrina's new SUV." I hadn't even taken my coat off. She practically dragged me toward the living room window. "Isn't it beautiful?" "Very subtle," I said. Mom either missed the sarcasm or chose to ignore it. "Your father wanted her to have something dependable for work." I looked through the window again. "Does dependable require ventilated leather seats?" From the sofa. Sabrina laughed. She was 35. Perfectly dressed, despite being inside our parents' house. One ankle crossed over the other. "It's technically mine," she said. "The financing is in my name." Dad appeared from the dining room, carrying a bottle of wine. "The company reimburses part of it as a vehicle stipend." Of course it did. Sabrina worked for Dad's contracting company. She had joined less than 5 years earlier, and somehow climbed faster than people who had been there for 15. Dad called it talent. Other people might have called it being the owner's daughter. "You can't meet serious clients in some beat-up car." Dad continued. "Presentation matters." His eyes flicked toward the window, toward my sedan, only for a second, still long enough. Sabrina smiled. "Image inspire confidence." Apparently nothing inspires confidence like a panoramic sunroof. I said. Nobody laughed. Mom gave me that familiar look. "Be nice?" Meaning don't interrupt the ceremony. Dinner wasn't any better. Mom served casserole. Dad poured wine. Sabrina talked about 2 contracts she'd recently helped close. I mostly pushed green beans around my plate. Then Dad raised his glass. 2 contracts in 1 month. Sabrina smiled modestly, or at least performed modesty. "I'm proud of you," Mom said. Dad nodded. "Clients trust Sabrina. She's becoming a real leader." I took a sip of water. "The SUV probably helps." Sabrina glanced at me. "You joke. But presentation matters in business." "I've heard." Dad's expression hardened. He had already decided I was being difficult. That was another family tradition. Whenever Sabrina bragged, she was confident. Whenever I noticed, I was jealous. Dad continued talking. "When I was her age, I didn't have half her drive. Sabrina understands what it takes to build something. She's setting the bar for this family." There it was. The bar. Sabrina's bar. Somehow. Mine had always been placed somewhere underground. I stared at my plate and told myself not to engage. I had done that for years. Smile. Nod. Go home. Transfer money when they called. Pretend none of it bothered me. Then Dad set his fork down. The small metallic clink cut through the room. He looked directly at me. "You know, Mara, Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever dream of being. Silence. Even Sabrina's expression changed. For half a second, she looked uncomfortable. Mom stared at Dad. I waited for someone to laugh. Nobody did. Dad sat there with his chin raised, almost challenging me. Usually, I would have swallowed it. That night, something inside me simply stopped cooperating. I leaned back. Cool. Dad frowned. I continued. Then she can cover your mortgage. Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Sabrina blinked. What? Dad's face tightened instantly. Mara. I looked at Sabrina. You heard me. She stared between our parents and me. Cover their mortgage. Why would I cover their mortgage? Because, apparently you're twice the woman I am. Mara. Dad warned again. But the strange thing was, I wasn't angry anymore. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. But my voice stayed almost conversational. Besides, I've been covering it long enough. Sabrina's fork slipped from her fingers and hit the plate. What do you mean you've been covering it? Mom went pale. Dad's expression told me everything. He didn't want Sabrina to know. Interesting. I slowly turned toward her. For almost 3 years, money has been leaving my account every month to keep this house current. Sabrina stared at Dad. Dad, it's complicated. I laughed once. Not really. Mom stepped in. Mara, this isn't appropriate dinner conversation. Neither was telling me I'm half the woman Sabrina is. Dad's palm hit the table. The dishes rattled. Enough. I looked directly at him. No. I think I've been enough for about 3 years. His face reddened. Everything you've contributed has been appreciated. Appreciated. I almost smiled. That's fascinating. Because 20 seconds ago, you were explaining how inadequate I am. Mara. Mom whispered. You're being sensitive. There it was. That word. Sensitive. The family's emergency exit. Whenever reality became uncomfortable, I pushed my chair backward. You know what? You're right. Mom looked relieved too quickly. I stood. Sabrina's the successful one. She's the leader. She's the future. I reached for my coat, so she can be the safety net too. Sabrina finally spoke. Wait. Are you seriously saying you've been paying this mortgage? I looked at her. Ask Dad. Then I turned toward my parents. No more transfers. Dad stood. You can't suddenly make decisions that affect everyone because you're upset. I stared at him. The irony almost impressed me. Actually, Dad, decisions involving my money are exactly the kind I'm allowed to make. His jaw tightened. You'll regret making family problems public. We're sitting in your dining room. I slipped my coat on. Nothing's public. Not yet. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Mom called my name. I stopped long enough to glance through the window. Sabrina's SUV gleamed beneath the driveway lights, like a trophy. Enjoy the car, I said. Then I looked at Dad. Hopefully it knows how to make mortgage payments. I left before anyone answered. The cold air outside felt cleaner. For the first time in years. I wasn't driving home wondering what I should have said. I'd actually said it, but anger kept me awake that night. Not screaming anger, something quieter. At 2 a.m, I opened my banking records. I wanted a number. Every transfer, every emergency payment, just this once. The arrangement had begun 3 years earlier. Dad called me close to midnight. His voice had been shaking. Mara. We're in trouble. I'd sat upright in bed. He explained that business had slowed. They were behind. Another missed mortgage payment could put the house at risk. Just 1 month. He promised. I sent the money. Then another payment came due. Then another. 1 month became 6. 6 became 12. Whenever I tried to stop, Mom would call. Whenever Mom couldn't convince me, Dad would, "We're almost through this. Just help us until the next contract closes. You're the only one we can rely on." That last sentence used to make me proud. Now, it made me sick. The next morning, I decided to look at everything. Bank records, savings, credit accounts, my credit report. I was halfway down the page when I saw an account I didn't recognize. Mortgage-related. Same lender as my parents. My stomach tightened. I clicked. The loan had originated almost exactly 3 years earlier. I downloaded the attached records. Refinance, document, borrower information. My parents' names appeared first, then mine. I stopped breathing for a second. There was my social security information, my credit history, their house listed as my mailing address, and at the bottom of one page, my signature, except it wasn't my signature. Someone had tried to imitate it. The first letter was wrong. The angle was wrong. Even the way my last name curved upward at the end was wrong. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 3 years. All those calls, all those promises, they hadn't simply asked me to help them. Before the first desperate phone call ever came, they'd already tied me to the debt. Without asking, without telling me, without giving me a choice, I printed every page. Then I placed them carefully into a folder, because suddenly, the problem wasn't favoritism anymore. It wasn't Sabrina's SUV. It wasn't Dad's insult. It wasn't even the $68. 000 plus I'd poured into that house. Someone had forged my name. And whoever had done it was about to learn something my family had never bothered to understand about me. Being quiet wasn't the same thing as being weak. The next morning, the folder sat on my kitchen counter, like something radioactive. I kept walking past it. Coffee, shower, breakfast. I barely touched. Then back to the folder. Every time I opened it, I found another detail that made my stomach twist. The refinance had been processed 3 years earlier. Right around the same time, Dad first called me in the middle of the night, begging for help. That timing bothered me most, because it meant the call hadn't necessarily been the beginning. It might have been the cover story. They hadn't come to me first and asked whether I would co-sign. They hadn't explained that the bank wouldn't approve them on their own. They hadn't even given me a chance to say no. Someone had simply decided my credit was available. My future was available. My name was available. And then they called afterward, acting like I was voluntarily rescuing them. The mailing address made it even worse. Every notice connected to the refinance had gone to my parents' house. Statements, disclosures, letters, anything that might have tipped me off. All of it went directly to the same people who had every reason to keep me from seeing it. I printed the credit report too. Then the old bank transfers. Then screenshots of Dad's messages. Just 1 more month. We're almost caught up. You're saving this family. I put everything into chronological order. By Saturday afternoon, the folder was thick enough to make denial difficult, so I drove over. I didn't call first. Mom opened the door wearing an apron, and that automatic smile she used whenever appearances mattered more than reality. Mara, what a surprise. We need to talk. Something in my voice wiped the smile off her face. I stepped inside before she could redirect me. Dad was in the living room watching television. Sabrina was stretched across the other end of the sofa, scrolling through her phone. Her keys sat on the coffee table. The logo on the key fob caught the light. That stupid SUV again. For some reason, seeing it made me calmer. Perfect, I said. Dad muted the television. What is this? I didn't sit. I removed the documents from the folder and dropped them onto the coffee table. Explain. Dad looked down. His eyes moved across the first page. For 1 second, something flashed across his face. Not confusion, recognition. Then it disappeared. Explain what? I almost admired the attempt. Don't. Sabrina sat up. What's going on? I pointed at the paperwork. That's the mortgage refinance from 3 years ago. She looked at Dad. So, my name is on it. Sabrina frowned. Wait. You co-signed. I laughed. No. Dad's voice hardened. Mara. I ignored him. I never signed this. Sabrina stared at me. Then at the page. Then back at me. What do you mean? I picked up the signature page and held it toward her. I mean, somebody forged my signature. Mom appeared in the doorway. The color left her face. That was all the confirmation I needed. I turned slowly. You knew. Mara, you knew. Mom's hands tightened around the dish towel she was holding. Your father was desperate. Dad stood. Don't make this sound criminal. I stared at him. What would you call signing another person's name on a mortgage? I did what I had to do. There it was. Not denial, just justification. Sabrina looked genuinely stunned. Dad. You forged her signature. We were going to lose the house. And that made my identity yours. He exhaled sharply. You have good credit. I actually laughed. That's your defense. Mom stepped closer. We knew you could handle it. Those 6 words hurt more than I expected. Not because they were cruel, because they explained everything. I could handle it. That was always the excuse. Sabrina needed help. Mara could handle it. Sabrina needed encouragement. Mara could handle it. Sabrina needed a company vehicle. Mara could handle her old sedan. Sabrina needed promotions because she was finding herself. Mara could handle disappointment. You used me because I was responsible. Mom shook her head. No. We trusted you. No. You exploited me. Dad's expression turned hard. Watch your tone. That almost made me smile. My tone. I tapped the papers. You forged my name into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and you're worried about my tone. Sabrina rubbed both hands over her face. I didn't know about this. I looked at her. Maybe you didn't. She lowered her hands. Then, stop acting like I did. Fine. I gestured toward her keys. But while I was paying to keep this place from foreclosure, Dad was subsidizing that. Her jaw tightened. I earned my position. Maybe. I nodded. But somebody else was funding the stability that allowed this whole little success story to continue. Dad stepped between us. Leave Sabrina out of it. Of course. Even now. Protect Sabrina. Uzimara. I didn't bring her into this. I said. You did every time you compared us. You're jealous. Sabrina said it quietly. I turned toward her. Jealous. You've always hated that Dad respects me. That one almost landed. Almost. Then I remembered the forged signature sitting between us. No. Sabrina. I hate that Dad built your pedestal on top of my bank account. She stood. That's ridiculous. Is it? I looked at Dad. How much did the company spend on her vehicle stipend this year? That's business. And my money keeping your house alive wasn't. Silence. Mom tried again. We only asked you because Sabrina was still getting established. I slowly looked at her. She's 35. Mom's mouth closed. Sabrina has always needed more support. She said finally. I nodded. And I've always needed less because I don't complain. Nobody answered. That was the moment everything became clear. They hadn't overlooked me accidentally. They had calculated me. The stronger daughter gets less because she can survive it. The dependable daughter pays because she'll eventually say yes. The quiet daughter can be hurt because she won't embarrass anyone. Until she does. I gathered the papers. Dad watched me. What exactly are you planning? For starters, I slid the documents back into the folder. No more mortgage payments. Mom's eyes widened. Mara. You can't just stop. I looked at her. I absolutely can. The bank isn't my problem. Dad stepped forward. It is legally your problem. His words hung in the air. He realized too late what he'd just admitted. I smiled without humor. Exactly. His face changed. I tapped the folder. That's why I'm dealing with the legal part next. Mom went still. Sabrina whispered. Legol. Dad's voice dropped. Don't threaten us. I'm not. I walked toward the door. I'm telling you what's happening. That Monday, I sat across from an attorney named Elena Park. She was maybe 10 years older than me. Sharp-eyed, calm, and completely unimpressed by family excuses. I laid everything across her desk. She read silently for several minutes. Refinance agreement, credit report, mailing address, bank transfers, screenshots. Then she looked at me. You did not authorize this. No. You never signed in person. No. Never electronically. No. Never gave your father power of attorney. No. Elena leaned back. This is serious. My mouth went dry. How serious? Potential identity theft. Fraud. Forgery. Hearing the words from someone outside the family changed something. For 3 years, they'd trained me to treat their emergencies like obligations. Now a stranger was looking at the same facts and calling them crimes. What happens if I report it? That depends on jurisdiction, lender response, and what investigators determine. But yes, a police report is an option. So is formally disputing the loan. Part of me wanted to do it immediately. I pictured Dad opening the door to investigators, Mom crying, Sabrina finally seeing consequences no one could smooth over. But anger wasn't enough. I needed out. What gives me the best chance of removing my liability? Elena folded her hands. We put them on notice. She drafted the letter that afternoon. 30 days. Refinance the mortgage without my name. Remove me from all liability. Provide written confirmation. If they refused, we would proceed with formal fraud reporting and dispute procedures. Simple. Cold. No family language. No guilt. 2 days after the letter arrived, Mom called. She was already crying when I answered. Mara, how could you send us something like this? A legal notice. Through an attorney. You forged my signature. We are your parents. That didn't stop you. She inhaled sharply. We were protecting the family home. You were protecting a house. Mara, and you sacrificed my credit to do it. We knew you'd help. You never asked? Silence. Then she said the sentence that ended the conversation for me. You would have said yes eventually. I closed my eyes. That was the whole problem. They believed my consent was optional because they assumed they could obtain it afterward. I have to go. Mara? Please. I hung up. Dad called 20 minutes later. No tears. Just rage. You've lost your mind. Probably. You send a lawyer after your own parents. You forged a loan using your own daughter. This family gave you everything. I laughed. Apparently, including debt. You are humiliating us. Good. He stopped. I surprised myself with that answer. Maybe humiliation is what happens when people finally hear the part you wanted hidden. His voice became quieter. You'll destroy this family's name. No. Dad. I looked at the folder on my desk. You gambled your own name the day you signed mine. He hung up. Then came Sabrina. Her text was shorter. You're seriously threatening Mom and Dad with police. I replied, I'm seriously giving them 30 days to fix what they did. She answered immediately. Families don't do this to each other. I stared at that one for a long time. Then typed. Exactly. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. You're blowing this up because you're bitter. I sent one final message. Try me. She stopped responding. For several days. Nothing happened. Mom sent occasional texts asking to talk like adults. Dad stayed silent. Then a letter appeared in my mailbox. Not from an attorney, from Dad. Typed. Signed. Cold enough to feel almost corporate. He wrote that because I had chosen to withdraw financial support and jeopardize the stability of the family, I would no longer be included in discussions concerning the property. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because suddenly I understood. He still thought exclusion was a punishment. He believed the house was power. Access was power. Approval was power. He hadn't realized I no longer wanted any of them. I folded the letter and added it to the evidence folder. 3 days later, my cousin Sarah called. I thought, you should know something. What? Your parents are planning a huge family banquet next month. I groaned. For what? They're calling it Family Appreciation Night. That sounds terrifying. Sarah gave a nervous laugh. It gets worse. I waited. Your dad's planning to make a speech about Sabrina. Of course. What kind of speech? Sarah hesitated. About how she stepped up when the family was struggling. My fingers tightened around the phone, and apparently how she helped preserve the family home. I said nothing. Sarah lowered her voice. Mar. I think they're going to publicly credit her with saving the house. For several seconds, I just stared through my apartment window. Then something inside me settled. Not anger. Not even surprise. Clarity. They were going to rewrite history. Again, only this time. They wanted witnesses. Are you invited? I asked. Yeah. Good. Mar. What? Please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I walked over to my desk and opened the folder. Bank records. Texts. Refinance document. Dad's letter. 3 years of truth. Oh. I'm going. Sarah sighed. This is going to be a disaster. I looked at my forged signature. No. I closed the folder. It's going to be accurate. For the next 3 weeks, I did absolutely nothing. At least, that was what my family thought. I didn't respond to Mom's increasingly emotional messages. I didn't react when Dad sent another warning about permanent consequences. I didn't engage when Sabrina posted a picture of herself standing beside her SUV with the caption, "Hard work speaks louder than jealousy." Sarah sent me the screenshot with 3 laughing emojis. I saved it, not because I needed it, because someday, I suspected it would be funny, mostly. I worked. I went to the office every morning, handled my projects, came home, cooked dinner, and tried to remember what life felt like when every phone notification didn't come with a family crisis attached. It was surprisingly peaceful. Without the mortgage transfers, my bank account started looking different almost immediately. For years, payday had meant watching money arrive and then disappear into someone else's house. Now it stayed. That alone felt strange, but every few nights, I opened the folder, 68美元. 450. That was the total I'd transferred over 3 years. $68,450. I had stared at that number so many times, it had stopped looking real. That could have been a down payment, an investment account. Years shaved off my own mortgage someday. Instead, it had gone into preserving a house where I could sit at the dinner table and be told I wasn't half the woman my sister was. And apparently, Dad was now preparing to stand in that same house and tell dozens of people that Sabrina had saved it. Fine. Let him. The invitation arrived 11 days before the banquet. Heavy cream paper, gold lettering. The Whitmore Family Appreciation Evening. Underneath, celebrating family. Legacy. and those who preserve it. I actually laughed. Sarah called that night. Please, tell me you got the invitation. I'm looking at it. They've invited everyone. How many is everyone? 40. Maybe 50. I whistled. Ambitious. Mara. Some of your dad's business contacts are coming. That got my attention. Business contacts, old clients, suppliers. I recognized a few names. I looked at the invitation again. Dad wasn't just rewriting history for relatives. He was turning Sabrina into a public symbol of family loyalty and business competence. That explained the theatrics. Are you still going? Sarah asked. Absolutely. You're terrifying when you're calm. I'll take that as a compliment. Mara. Her voice softened. You don't have to prove anything. I know. And I meant it. This wasn't about convincing my parents anymore. That battle was over. This was about refusing to let a lie become family history simply because Dad said it confidently enough the night of the banquet. I wore a dark navy dress, simple earrings, and the expression of someone attending a mildly inconvenient work function. The evidence folder stayed in my car. I brought only one folded sheet inside. I didn't need 20 documents. I needed facts. When I arrived, cars lined both sides of the street. Through the windows, I could see people moving around beneath warm lights. Laughter spilled through the open doorway. Then I saw Sabrina's SUV, front and center. Naturally, Mom spotted me the moment I walked inside. Her smile froze. For half a second, pure panic crossed her face. Then relatives noticed me, and suddenly she transformed. Mara. She hurried over and wrapped her arms around me. I'm so glad you came. The hug lasted slightly too long. I realized why. People were watching. She wanted everyone to see reconciliation. I stepped back. Wouldn't miss it. Her eyes searched mine. Can we please have a nice evening? I intend to. That answer clearly didn't reassure her. Dad stood across the room talking to two men I recognized from his company Christmas parties. He noticed me. His jaw tightened. He excused himself and approached. I wasn't sure you'd come. You invited me. I assumed you'd understand the spirit of tonight. Oh. I understand it perfectly. His eyes narrowed. Mara. Relax. Dad. I smiled. It's family appreciation night. Before he could answer, someone called his name. I walked away. Sabrina was holding court near the dining room. New blouse. Perfect hair. Glass of wine. She saw me and gave me a tiny smile. Not friendly. Victorious. Glad you came. Wouldn't miss your coronation. Her smile tightened. Still bitter. About what? She gestured vaguely. Everything. I looked at her. The strange thing was, I didn't hate Sabrina. Not really. For years. I'd blamed her because she benefited from the favoritism, but standing there, I realized something uncomfortable. She'd spent her whole life inside the same system I had. The difference was that it rewarded her. Why would she question something that constantly told her she was exceptional? Still, ignorance had limits, especially after she learned the truth and chose to defend them anyway. I'm doing great. Actually, I said. Her eyes flickered. Good. How's the SUV? Fantastic. Enjoy it. Something in my tone made her expression change. I walked away. Dinner started around 7. The room was packed. Aunt Linda sat near the front. Sarah was 2 tables away from me. Neighbors. Cousin. Dad's employees. Business associates. People who had known us since childhood. Mom had even arranged framed family photographs along one wall. Sabrina appeared in most of them. I appeared in enough to prove I existed. Dinner passed slowly. Then dessert arrived. Dad stood. He tapped his fork against his glass. Clink, clink, clink. The sound transported me instantly back to that Friday dinner. The room quieted. Dad smiled. First, thank you all for being here. Applause. This house has been part of our family for decades. Mom smiled up at him. Dad placed one hand against his chest. We've celebrated birthdays here. Graduations. Christmas mornings. Engagement. Difficult times and wonderful ones. People nodded. And the last few years haven't always been easy. That part, at least, was true. But family isn't defined by easy times. It's defined by who steps forward when things get difficult. I glanced at Sarah. She was already watching me, Dad continued. And no one has demonstrated that better than my eldest daughter, Sabrina. There it was. Applause began. Sabrina lowered her eyes modestly. Dad gestured toward her. She's worked tirelessly to strengthen our business, preserve what this family built, and help ensure this home remains part of our legacy. More applause. Her dedication and sacrifices helped carry this family through one of our most difficult periods. I almost admired the wording, technically vague enough to defend, emotionally specific enough to create the lie. Sabrina stood. People applauded louder. She hugged Mom, then Dad. Someone shouted, "Speech." Sabrina laughed. I didn't prepare anything. That's never stopped you before. Sarah muttered. I nearly choked on my water. Sabrina lifted her glass. I just want to say that family means everything to me. Dad taught me that leadership means stepping up when people depend on you. That was enough. I placed my napkin beside my plate, then stood. I'd like to say something. The room shifted. Mom's smile vanished. Dad's face hardened instantly. Mara. It's okay. I didn't raise my voice. I'll only take a minute. Dad stepped toward me. This isn't necessary. I think it is. People were looking between us now. Sabrina remained standing. Her glass slowly lowered. I looked around the room. I've heard a lot tonight about sacrifice, about preserving this house, about stepping up when family needed help. Dad's face had gone rigid, so I thought everyone might appreciate the complete story. I reached into my handbag and removed the folded paper. Mom whispered something. I couldn't hear it. For the last 3 years, I've been making payments toward this house. Someone near the front frowned. I continued. Not occasionally. Every month. The room became quieter. The total I've personally transferred is $68,450. Whispers erupted immediately. Aunt Linda turned toward Mom. One of Dad's business associates leaned toward the man beside him. Sabrina's face tightened. Mara, she said. I kept going. The payments started after Dad called me late one night, saying the bank might take the house. Dad interrupted. This is private financial information. I looked at him. You made the story public. Silence. So let's make it accurate. I unfolded the paper, but the payments aren't actually the most interesting part. Mom closed her eyes. I saw it. That tiny reaction. She knew exactly what was coming. 3 years ago, this mortgage was refinanced. I held up the document. My name appears on the refinance. People stared. So does my signature. I paused. I never signed it. A woman near the back gasped. Someone whispered. What? Dad stepped forward. Enough. No. My voice stayed calm. You wanted everyone here to celebrate the person who supposedly saved this house. I looked toward Sabrina. Her face had lost all color, so they deserved to know whose credit was actually tied to it. Dad's voice dropped. Mara. Sit down. I looked directly at him. No. Nobody moved. The signature attached to that refinance isn't mine. I've consulted an attorney. My parents have been formally given 30 days to remove me from the debt. Now the room erupted. Question. Whispers. Chairs shifting. Dad's business associates exchanged looks. Mom's hands started trembling. Sabrina finally spoke. I didn't know about the signature. I turned toward her. I know. For a second, relief appeared on her face. Then I continued. But you knew before tonight. Her relief disappeared. You knew what happened. And you still stood here, accepting applause for saving a house you never paid for. Mara. That's not fair. I nodded. You're right. I looked at Dad. Fair would have been asking me before forging my name. Dead silence. Dad looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just suddenly ordinary. No booming voice. No authority. No family patriarch controlling the room. Just a man standing beside a lie that had finally become too large to manage. I folded the document, and one more thing. Dad stared at me. At dinner, a few weeks ago, Dad told me Sabrina was twice the woman I'd ever dream of being. Several relatives looked uncomfortable, so I told him something. I glanced at Sabrina. If that's true, she can pay the mortgage. Sarah covered her mouth. Someone laughed. Then another person did. Dad's face turned crimson. I didn't smile. This isn't about competing with Sabrina. I looked around the room. It's about telling the truth. I returned the paper to my bag. If you're going to thank someone for keeping this house standing, at least know who was actually paying to keep the bank away. Then I sat down. Nobody applauded. That would have felt cheap. Instead, something worse happened to my parents. People started asking questions. Did you really sign her name? Was Mara paying the whole time? Why didn't anyone know? Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Dad kept repeating variations of, "It's complicated." Sabrina sat down and stared at her plate. The banquet never recovered. Dessert was served into near silence. People left early. Several stopped beside me before leaving. Some squeezed my shoulder. Others simply said, I had no idea. Neither had I. Not for years. Around 10. I stood. Sarah followed me outside. Hoi hell. I exhaled. Too much. No. She looked back toward the house. Exactly enough. Behind the curtains, silhouettes moved rapidly. Arguments had already started. I walked toward my car. For the first time, I didn't care what was happening inside that house. The truth was out. They couldn't put it back. By noon the next day, my phone looked like it had survived an explosion. 23 notifications, 7 missed calls, 4 voicemails, messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Sarah called around lunch. Mara. What? You're officially family folklore. I laughed. That bad. Worse. Then her voice changed. And your dad's business people heard everything. I stopped smiling. What do you mean? One of the guys at the banquet has already been asking questions. The fallout moved faster than I expected. Within a week, one longtime client stopped working with Dad. Then another started reconsidering an upcoming contract. Nobody wanted their finances tangled with a man accused of forging his daughter's signature. Dad's precious reputation, the thing he'd spent years protecting, started cracking. Then, the consequences reached Sabrina. Dad's company stopped reimbursing her vehicle stipend. Suddenly, the glamorous SUV wasn't a symbol of success. It was a monthly payment. Insurance, fuel, debt, all hers. Someone at the company apparently started calling her Truck Princess. Then a screenshot reached Sarah. A photo of Sabrina beside her SUV. Caption, sponsored by Mara Whitmore. I shouldn't have laughed. I did. Mom's messages changed by the hour. You humiliated us. Then, we forgive you. Then, please call. Dad stayed consistent. You destroyed this family. I never responded. Because while their world became louder, Mine became quieter. At work, I landed a project I'd been chasing for months. I stayed late, delivered early. A month later, my boss called me into her office. "We're increasing your salary." It wasn't life-changing money, but it was mine. My freelance work grew too. For the first time in years, every extra dollar wasn't disappearing into my parents' crisis. I started looking at property, not dreaming, looking. 2 months after the banquet, I signed closing documents on a modern duplex, 2 units, clean lines, small balconies, nothing extravagant. But my name was on the deed, my real signature. I moved into 1 unit and rented the other. The first night, I sat alone on my balcony with a glass of wine and stared at the building across the street. I owned this. No guilt, no manipulation, no forged paperwork. No, Sabrina. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. "Need a favor. Can we talk?" I knew who it was before the next message appeared. Sabrina. I stared at those words for several seconds, then smiled. The golden child finally needed the safety net, and this time, the safety net wasn't there. I didn't answer Sabrina. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not when she sent another message around lunch. "Please, Mara. It's important." For most of my life, Sabrina had never needed to wait for anything. Dad answered her calls. Mom rearranged plans for her. Problems disappeared before she had time to feel uncomfortable. I wondered what it felt like to stare at a phone and realize the person you needed wasn't rushing to rescue you. So I let her wait. 2 days later, I finally replied, "Come by tomorrow." Known. She arrived at 1207. I noticed because Sabrina was usually the kind of person who treated punctuality as something other people owed her. From my living room window, I watched the SUV pull up. It didn't look quite as impressive anymore. There was a dent near the rear passenger door. The wheels were dirty. One corner of the bumper had a scrape across it. Maybe nothing had changed about the vehicle. Maybe I had. Sabrina climbed out wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual polished work clothes. She stood outside for several seconds before walking toward my door. When I opened it, she looked tired. Dark circles beneath her eyes. Hair pulled back carelessly. No confident smile. "Hey. Hey." Her eyes moved past me. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the duplex and stopped. "Whoa." I closed the door. "This is really yours. Half of the building is where I live. I rent the other unit." She looked around. The kitchen had quartz counters, warm pendant lights, and the furniture I'd slowly bought after moving in. Nothing spectacular. But everything belonged to me. This place is really nice. "Thanks." She gave a small laugh. "Look at you." I leaned against the counter. "Skip the tour." "Sabrina, what do you need?" Her smile disappeared. She sat on one of the stools. For a moment, she rubbed her palms together. "Dad cut the vehicle stipend." I heard. Her eyes snapped toward me. "Of course you did. Sarah knows everything." That almost made her smile. Almost. "The payment's bigger than I thought." I said nothing. Then, insurance went up. "I've got my condo payment. Utilities. Cards." She exhaled. I thought I had more room. There it was. Not an apology. A budget problem. "How much?" She hesitated. 2,000 would get me through this month. I stared at her. "You're asking me for $2,000. Not asking you to give it to me." "Alwan." "Right. I'll pay you back." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Her face hardened. "What's funny?" I walked around the counter. "Do you remember Dad's dinner? What about it?" "The night this started." Her expression changed. I continued. "He told me you were twice the woman I'd ever dream of being." Mada. Don't. No. It's interesting. I sat across from her. Because if I'm only half the woman you are, I'm trying to understand why the math ends with you asking me for money. Her cheeks reddened. That was Dad talking. And you sat there smiling. What was I supposed to do? Maybe tell him not to humiliate your sister. She looked away. You've hated me forever. No. That made her look back. I hated what happened around you. She frowned. There's a difference. I gestured between us. You were rewarded for needing things. I was punished for not needing them. Sabrina's expression shifted, just slightly. I continued. Whenever you struggled, Mom and Dad helped you. Whenever I struggled, they reminded me how strong I was. I didn't ask them to forge your signature. I know. Then why are you treating me like I did? Because after you found out, you still defended them. Silence. You told me families get over things. She looked down. You called me bitter. Nothing. And then you stood in that banquet accepting applause for saving a house you knew I'd been paying for. Her eyes filled with anger. Do you know what happened after that night? Yes. No. You don't. Her voice cracked. People at work laugh at me. I stayed quiet. Dad's losing clients. Mom barely sleeps. Everyone talks about us like we're criminals. Your father forged my signature. I know. Her voice echoed through the room. She immediately lowered it. I know. For the first time. There was no defense afterward. No excuse. She stared at the floor. I should have said something at the banquet. I waited. She swallowed. I should have stopped Dad before he made that speech. That was probably the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. But an apology wasn't a financial plan. I hope you figure things out. I said. Her eyes lifted. But I'm not giving you money. Mada. No. Just until things stabilize. That phrase, I almost laughed again. Just until things stabilize. Dad had used almost exactly those words 3 years earlier. Sell the SUV. Her expression hardened. I can't. Why? I'd lose money. Then lose money. Easy for you to say. It actually is. I stood. You wanted the vehicle. You signed the financing. Your signature is real. That landed. She stared at me. I didn't look away. Finally. She stood. So that's it. That's it. She grabbed her purse. At the door. She stopped. You really enjoy this. Don't you? No. I thought about it. I enjoy not being responsible for you. She left without another word. From the window. I watched her climb into the SUV. For several seconds, she just sat behind the wheel. Then she drove away. A week later, someone knocked on my door around 6 in the evening. Mo and Dad. Together. I almost didn't open it. Mom looked older. Her eyes were swollen. Dad's suit was wrinkled. His tie slightly crooked. That bothered me more than I expected. My father had always treated his appearance like armor. Seeing the armor cracked made the situation feel real. Mara. Mom said softly, we need to talk. I stayed in the doorway. You can talk from there. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom touched his arm. We're trying to make things right. Okay. She glanced toward Dad. He clearly hated what came next. We want to add you to the deed. I blinked. The house? I know which deed. Dad finally spoke. Your mother and I discussed it. You and Sabrina would both be named. For a second, I couldn't believe them. Then, I understood. They still thought the house was the prize. After everything, they thought ownership would bring me back. I almost smiled. No. Mom blinked. What? No thanks. Mada. Listen, adding me to the deed doesn't fix anything. It's equity. Dad said. You've contributed financially. We're acknowledging that. 3 years late. We're trying. No. You're negotiating. Mom's eyes filled. Why does everything have to be a fight now? I looked at her. Because when I was cooperative, you forged my name. She flinched. Dad's voice hardened. We've already spoken to the bank. Good. We're exploring refinancing. Even better? But things aren't simple. They were simple when you signed my name. His face reddened. Mom stepped forward. We could lose the house. There it was. The old trigger? The sentence that once would have sent me reaching for my banking app. I waited for the guilt. It never came. I'm sorry to hear that. Mom stared at me. Mara. What do you want me to say? This is our home. I know. The home you grew up in. I know. The home your future children could visit. I shook my head. Don't sell me memories when you're asking me to finance debt. Dat stiffened. Nobody is asking for money. Not yet. Silence. Mom started crying. We're still your family. That sentence used to work too. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door nearly closed behind me. You know what I've realized? Neither answered. Every time you needed something from me, you talked about family. Dad looked away. But whenever I needed respect, suddenly, it was about Sabrina being more talented, more impressive, more successful. Mom wiped her cheek. We made mistakes. You made choices. Mara. Please? No. My voice didn't rise. I spent years thinking there was something wrong with me because you treated Sabrina like she was extraordinary and treated me like I was useful. Mom closed her eyes. And the worst part, I looked at Dad. You exploited me because you knew I'd survive it. He said nothing. You knew I'd work harder. Nothing. You knew I'd save. Nothing. You knew I'd answer the midnight call. Dad's eyes finally met mine. And you decided that meant you were entitled to take more. His shoulders lowered slightly. For once, he didn't have a speech. Mom whispered. What do you want from us? That question surprised me. Months earlier, I would have had a list, an apology, recognition, repayment, for Dad to finally admit Sabrina wasn't better than me. Standing there now, I realized I didn't need any of it. Nothing. Mom looked confused. I don't want the house. I looked at Dad. I don't want a place in the company. Then Mom, I don't want to be added to anything. I opened my door, refinance the mortgage, get my name off the debt. After that, whatever happens to the house is yours to deal with. Dad's voice was quieter when he spoke. And us. I paused. I don't know. That answer hurt them more than anger would have, but it was true. Maybe someday. Mom started crying harder. But not while every apology comes attached to something you need. I stepped inside. Dad didn't argue. Mom didn't reach for me. For several seconds, we just looked at each other. Then I closed the door, quietly. No slam. No dramatic final line. Just a click. 6 weeks later, Elena called. The refinance cleared. I sat upright at my desk. I'm off. You're off. I closed my eyes. Completely. Your liability under that mortgage has been removed. We'll keep copies of everything. Obviously. I exhaled. 3 years of pressure left my chest in one breath. Thank you. After the call, I pulled my credit report. The disputed obligation was being corrected for the first time since discovering the forgery. I felt like my future belonged entirely to me again. I heard through Sarah that my parents eventually sold the house. They couldn't comfortably maintain it after losing several contracts. Dad downsized the business. Sabrina sold the SUV. Apparently, she hated doing it. She moved into a smaller apartment and started working with another company several months later, for the first time in her adult life. Dad wasn't her boss. We didn't suddenly become close. Life doesn't work like that. But one afternoon, I received a message from her. No request. No money problem. Just 6 words, I should have stood up for you. I stared at it for a long time, then replied, yes, you should have. A minute later, I'm sorry. I didn't forgive everything because of 2 words. But I didn't delete the message either. Mom still called occasionally. I answered sometimes. Dad rarely called. When he did, the conversations were short. Strangely, I preferred that. No speeches. No comparison. No declarations about who was stronger. Just 2 people learning that access to someone's life is not guaranteed by blood. A year after that dinner, I was standing on my duplex balcony with coffee when a tenant's rent notification appeared on my phone. I smiled. The building wasn't glamorous. It didn't have decades of Whitmore family history. Nobody had hosted Christmas there when I was 8. But every payment was legitimate. Every document carried my actual signature. Every brick represented a choice I'd made for myself. For years, Dad's words had lived in my head. Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever dream of being. I used to think proving him wrong meant becoming richer than Sabrina, more successful, more respected. It didn't. The real victory was simpler. I stopped measuring myself against her at all. Sabrina had spent years being the golden child. I had spent years being the safety net. Neither role had been healthy, so I walked away from mine. My parents lost the daughter who would rescue them without boundaries. Sabrina lost the pedestal that protected her from consequences. And I lost something too. The desperate need to finally be chosen. I looked across the street as morning light reflected off the windows. My phone was quiet. My bank account was mine. My home was mine. My future was mine. And for the first time in 32 years, being underestimated didn't bother me. Because I no longer needed the people who underestimated me to understand what I was worth. I already did.